Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and it's finally time to talk about Eve Echoes, the latest game in the EVE Online IP, and one of the first to actually not be developed directly by CCP but in partnership with NetEase. And before we get into all that though, as I live in the UK, I do have to acknowledge that this video is sponsored by NetEase, who apparently like my content enough to reach out and try and work to make something with me. And as a result of that, this video is going to be completely ad-free, even to people who don't have ad blocker installed. Don't worry though, I am still completely free to criticise the game, and we'll get to that right at the end of the video. If you want to try the game out for yourself, you can do so by downloading the beta directly through the Google Play Store on Android, or by downloading the Test Flight app and using that to access it on iOS. Alright, so with that out of the way, I think it's best to just introduce you guys to the core gameplay loop of Eve Echoes, and the best way to do that I think is just with a walkthrough of the tutorial. Okay, so as you can see I already have my main character set up, but like in regular EVE Online you can have up to 3 characters. I'm not sure if you can skill train them at once, but that's something we're going to find out together. And as you can see, my character's already in nullsec, I've already seen a bit of PvP, and I will in fact be in VFK by Christmas. But let's just boot up another character. And you get introduced with this section from I think the 2017 FanFest trailer, which I always thought was pretty rad. It was the Birth of the Capsuleer trailer, and then you get to choose the races, and the races mean even less in Eve Echoes than they do in the main game, and we'll get onto why later. But I'm just gonna go Caldari because missiles seem like they're pretty good in this game right now. Let's go Akura, because that used to be powerful, and you don't have a full character creator like you did in Eve, but you get a bunch of portraits to choose from. Yes, that's my boy. And I'm going to go for... yeah, we'll just go for an auto-generated name actually, because why not? And there we are. That's all you basically get to do in character creation. There's no choosing your bloodlines, no choosing your school or anything like that. And that kind of is something that we see a lot of in the game, where a lot of those extraneous choices are streamlined away just because it's a mobile game and you want to have quicker play sessions. You don't want to have to be worrying about something like your space paperwork for an hour in this game. And also, the UI has to be smaller. And now we can just progress through a thing. I've actually got a voice muted, but there is actually like an aura voice that's talking to you whilst you're doing this normally. I just didn't want to have it talk over me because I figured that would be kind of confusing to listen to. And yes, we'll do the tutorial. Swipe screen. Yep, we can definitely do that. And then we have to zoom, and as I mentioned in my tutorial video on running on this on an emulator, it can be kind of finicky, but as long as you have it set up right, it's just as simple as either tapping or holding the button. Oh, does it want me to go all the way out? Yeah, it does. Oh, I have to click it. There we go. But yeah. Now we can go in and take a look at our ship. There we go. The controls are fairly simple in that way, at least in terms of how the camera works. And now we get to take a look at the overview, and as you can see, it is kind of similar to Eve, and it actually uses the exact same layout, but this is something that's kind of unique to the mobile game, and that's the autopilot function being really, really good. Like, it warps to 0, it docks for you, it warps instantly. It's basically almost a perfect auto travel system, and it can make you relatively hard to catch, and it just makes travel a lot easier because And that's something that's kind of necessary because of the way this is set up. You can't display that many results in a screen like this. I should probably move my camera away. And what this does is it means that you don't have to constantly switching to gates each jump and then switching over to this to see what ships are nearby, and then maybe switching over to this to find a station to dock in. You don't have to do very much of that. You just set a destination and then you can concentrate on keeping an eye on your surroundings whilst you're moving. Yep, you just dock in a station, and this should all feel very familiar to you if you're an EVE Online player. Anyway, the next step in the tutorial is just the basic combat overview, and it's going to feel mostly similar again to EVE combat, but there are a few key differences, and we'll see that in a moment. Alright, so I cut out most of the travel, but by the time we arrive in the anomaly, we get a brief introduction to the overview. And you can either click on targets and lock them directly, or you can just use this easy lock thing. And here, you just press the button, the guns fire, and the rats go explode. That's all pretty simple, right? But there are a few key differences, and I don't think you get to see them quite in this tutorial. One of them is that easy lock button will just lock the closest 3 targets to you. And that means that you don't have to click on each thing individually and select lock on them. And you can also choose to exclude friendlies from it, which is very, very key in PvP, because there's only limited UI filtering. Although I will say it's remarkable that the actual overview filtering on EVE Echoes is a lot easier to manage than the overview filtering in EVE, because it doesn't have to deal with all the legacy NPC types and stuff like that. Okay, so with the combat tutorial over, the next thing that I need to do is get a new ship. And to do that, we go into the market. And this is kind of similar to EVE's again, but one of the key differences right now is that the market hasn't reached full maturity. So you can see, as I go and click on the Condor, you'll see these stacks of 999 million Condors for sale in various systems, and those are all NPC seeded. But we would grab one here in our station, but I have already bought one. And if we go into our ship hangar, we can see it, and whilst we can select it, we can't board it right yet. And that's because we need to take a look at the skills system, which has some very key differences. Now, unfortunately, I can't progress much further in this tutorial because I already have a character that's training a skill on this account, and much like in regular EVE Online, you can only have one skill queue active at a time per account. But one of the interesting things is that, unlike in regular EVE, where this wouldn't actually preclude me from flying the ship, I'd just have to fly it with pretty poor supporting skills. In EVE Echoes, because of the concept of tech levels, it doesn't quite work that way. And what tech levels are the total SP that you have, and training up tech levels actually is what unlocks you ships, not training skills. And because of that, all skills are support skills that then go on to unlock you ships the more you train, as it's just the total of SP that actually allows you to unlock ships. And that's a really interesting way of tweaking the skill system to both simplify it, because as you can see, it means that you can show relatively little to people and they're still going to be able to make good choices, but you still have the option of going to like a full skill tree if you really want to, like this, with absolutely everything that you have open to you. It stops people from over-investing and over-specializing early on, and making sure they get a nice wide array of support skills without having to make it like a spoon-fed, you will follow this path kind of thing. And honestly, I quite like that. You also have some other simplifications, like as you can see here, frigate command is frigate command. You don't have to deal with Galante frigate, Caldari frigate, Amar frigate, on all of that being separate skills. Here you just train frigate command, and that applies to all frigates, and that goes for absolutely everything up to and including battleships. And it's the little changes like that that really stand out to me when I play EVE Echoes, seeing where decisions have been made about what parts of EVE Online were considered core to the EVE experience, and what ended up being streamlined, or in some cases even expanded on, for the mobile platform. So we still have the very foundation of EVE, with people playing together on one server in the same map, and there being very few limitations in world PvP, but the economy and PvE side of the game is completely different, as is the fitting, balance, and I'm sure as a result of all that, the eventual politics. Now, I am recording this on the 12th of December, so I can't claim to have remotely nailed down all of the changes yet, but let's go through some of the key things that I think you might want to know about. And the first is that PvE is a lot more challenging in Echoes, both as a result of it not having been optimized and figured out yet by other players, and also the wider selection of tools that enemies in the game have access to. If you go and try and take on a level 10 anomaly in Angel Cartel space, for example, expect sabers to spawn and bubble you, whilst multiple frigates web you down. In addition, as anomalies are the best way to make ISK in nullsec, they don't respawn instantly in a system, and you're encouraged to travel more as a result. Although if you do sit down and grind anomalies in one system, it will eventually spawn a base anomaly, which increases the anomaly respawn rate in that system, but can be completed for a chance at faction loot. And that's led to people already having started doing PvE raids on one another's space, as they don't want to kill their own bases as they provide steady income, but do want to try and get the chance at a faction loot. So they go and attack other people's source of steady income, which is a really great conflict driver, and I've already seen a couple of PvP fights take place inside those anomalies. And speaking of PvP, I have, through some miracle, actually managed to get a kill during my first 10 hours, so I'll just show you that here briefly to give you a view into what the PvP is like. As you can see, the time to kill in this is really, really low, so you've got to be super on your toes when you're playing. Come on! Heatsink's on! Let's go! What's he shooting at? Oh, he's trying to mine! He's mining his coercer. Come on, die! Die! Yes! 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 There we go! Boom! Another big change is that PI has been promoted to be on par with mining, as the resources that are produced from it over time are used in the production of most ships, not just in structures and T2 items. And that means you're likely going to need to do some yourself, as right now the market is relatively sparse as people are trying to build up items purely for themselves before selling them for a profit, meaning that you're going to have to find all the parts for what you want to fly yourself. Thankfully, PI and industry have been simplified, so it's relatively easy to just dive into, and you don't even have to mine for minerals, as reprocessing rat loot is still a great way to acquire chunks of high and low ends relatively easily. Now, the fleet mechanics aren't too dissimilar to the main EVE Online games either, although as I talked about before, your objectives when you're dealing with other players tend to be, and I expect the balance of the game to be drastically different, as ships have far less mid-slots to play around with, as those are purely used for modules that affect other players, like webs, points, newts, and remote repairs, whilst low slots are used for modules that affect your ship, like tank modules, heat sinks, and propulsion modules. And that means that the shield and armor dichotomy is going to play out very, very differently. Whilst I haven't the faintest inkling of what's actually going to be good, I doubt that what's good will even be measured on the same axis of the main game, and I'll be honest, as an avid theory crafter, that real unknown factor is something that draws me in a lot more than it might, the general audience, but it's something I've got to mention. Finally though, let's get to the promised criticism, but something I do want to preface this with is that EVE Echoes is an actual beta, not a dressed up early access or a free multiplayer demo, but something that is very much under active development right now, and you can see that from the patch notes on Discord, where balance changes, UI updates and bug fixes are detailed basically every day. Still, given that the game is in such a fluid state, I feel like this is definitely one of the best times to highlight some of the minor gameplay flaws that I've run into, as it's possible for them to be changed still. The first of these is just the lack of an equivalent to D-scan, which makes it nearly impossible to find players in a system without actively checking every individual belt and anomaly, even if you know they're in local and in space. And as such, most action tends to center around gate camps and points of travel, and those are troublesome endeavors in the first place, as only relatively high-end frigates have the mid-slots and the lock speed to carry a point and actually lock fast enough to catch someone who's autopiloting. And there's also a few other minor features like scooping corpses, reverse engineering, and most terrifyingly of all, a voice chat for local that will flag up a coming soon tooltip for you if you click on them, which is something I'll happily chalk up to its beta status. But we also don't have mechanics for corporations put into the game yet, which means that a lot of the coordination has to take place outside of the client for now, restricting the ability for casual players to really interact socially with the rest of the game. And that's something that I hope gets fixed in the near future, and according to updates from the devs it will be. Now, finally, there are also just a few niggles with spelling errors, such as cloaking being spelt with an extra C, or mild bits of inconsistent terminology in effect descriptions that come from the game just not having been developed in English and only then translated from Chinese into English. So if that's something that really gets to you, you have been forewarned, but I've not had any major issues understanding what the game is trying to tell me so far. In conclusion though, I've been having a ton of fun with Eve Echoes, and the fact that it plays at a much faster speed has made it a super fun game for me to stream specifically, especially as I'm trying to figure the mechanics of the game out, because, as I hope I've highlighted in this, it isn't really a port of EVE Online and more of just an alternative take on the base formula. The fact that you can just hop on and play it whenever you want and get some grinding done whilst waiting for a bus or taking a dump at work is more of a bonus to me than the real draw of it, at least for now. Still, I hope you've enjoyed the video and encourage you to let me know what your thoughts are on Echoes in the comments below. A special thanks as always goes out to our Crassuses, Pinche Infidel from Old School, Brood from Triumvirate and Zolka Lando, as well as to our other $5 and above patrons in Big Bada Boom, Czar, Dunk Dinkle, Raphael Dordiens, Kem, the Ashfell Federation, and Jessica. If you want to join them in supporting the channel yourself, you can either check out the Patreon link in the description below, or just share the video with some other people who you think might enjoy it, as helping to grow the channel is the biggest way you can support.